What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to give you a video on what is the best class in Diablo 4 for you. And the reason why I say for you is because technically this is a beta. Things are of course subject to change, but I've got 50 plus hours in the previous versions of the game. Blizzard hooked me up with access to the game in the previous versions, and I'm here to give you guys an idea on what would be the best class for you. As I've been asked frequently as a content creator that does do Diablo content, sometimes I go over like what's the best build for this season, which one can push the highest in the Greater Rift department. Now, we don't have access to the full endgame in this new beta that we're going to have access to. In fact, when they gave me access to the game, we were only limited to get to a certain level, just like in this beta. So some things could be, of course, subject to change. And I would say, if you like a certain playstyle, this video is absolutely for you, and I can pick the class that will suit your playstyle the best. As I actually did a lot of number crunching back when we had the Blizzard beta, all of the stats in the entirety of the game were set to be a 5% increase per stat point allocated. This was across the entire board. In terms of its base value, they would increase by 5%. So I'm not sure if this is going to be changing from that beta to this beta, but at the end of the day, what really matters is the playstyle. And I want to go ahead and go over this video for the best playstyle that suits your needs. So basically, in Diablo 4, there's a lot of classes like the Crusader, Paladin, the Witch Doctor. These don't exist in the game, and I'm here to give you the best class that can suit that role. That's what this goal of the video is for. And at the end of the day, just try out all the classes, is normally what I would say. But I understand people have, a life, and they might not be able to play, 30 hours a day. So let's go ahead and get started with the class identity so you guys can understand what the class is supposed to do in Diablo 4. So in terms of the 5 classes that we have in the game at launch, we're going to have the Sorcerer, the Barbarian, the Druid, the Rogue, as well as the Necromancer. So what does each class do in terms of its playstyle? The Wizard or the Sorcerer, basically the same thing, they are a caster. There is technically a melee build, which I'll kind of touch upon in this video, but primarily they're just going to be a caster. They're going to be sitting far back and just casting spells. If you like that playstyle, then hands down the Sorcerer is going to be mostly your choice, but there are hybrid classes. So if you like the idea of going in melee range, the Barbarian is for you. There is no build where you're going to be sitting far back like a weapon throw barb that you can play in D2, D3. There's none of that. So if you want to play Barbarian, the core identity of the class is to leap into combat, do some shouts, buff up yourself and your teammates, and then just go toe-to-toe with your enemies. Now, the Druid actually has all of the playstyles combined into one. You can sit back and be a caster. You can transform into different animals, so it's kind of like different. It's a transformer class, but it is mostly going to be melee when you do transform. But it's a very fluid build to actually play. You don't have to have certain abilities locked when you're in certain forms. You can just kind of just hit all the numbers and it's going to do everything. It's really smooth, but it's also a caster. So if you're kind of like, I haven't really decided what class I want to play, the Druid does everything in the game. Now, does it do it well? We'll talk about that in a second, but if you like the idea of having like a Javazon, a ranged character, maybe even a trapper, like you want to maybe dip into PvP, if you set up a trap and your opponent walks into it, it's going to be very, very advantageous for you. If you prefer that playstyle of either the Boazon from D2 or if you like the Demon Hunter from Diablo 3, this is totally going to be your class. It's the Rogue. It's a range / melee. So if you like the Monk from Diablo 3, it's actually basically the Rogue, as well as similar to the Assassin. If you are going to be playing like a claw build where you would kind of build up these combos, there is a build with the Rogue with that. And if you like a Summoner / caster, the Necromancer is your go-to class. You can play either, you could do hybrid, and that's the awesome thing with Diablo 4. There are hybrid classes. It's not kind of just locked into one, with the exception of, again, the Sorcerer as well as the Barbarian have relatively limited playstyles. Now, this could completely change with legendaries and uniques. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and link a video also in case you guys want to do check it out that goes over every single legendary in Diablo 4 as of that time. Keep in mind, there's going to be so many new things that come out when the game launches. More than likely, these may be changing, but it'll give you a good idea on what is possible with build ideas. I'm thinking like big brain in like Diablo 2, you can make a Werebear Sorceress, right? Or you can make Wolf Barbarian in Diablo 2. There are theory crafting ideas for other things that you need to see these items to even think about, right? So in terms of the class identity, this is the class identity. Now, going into what is the best class for you, let's go ahead and now go over if you were a fan of like this other class in the previous Diablo games, because they don't exist in Diablo 4, what class would be the best choice for you. So if you like the Crusader and Paladin, you basically like to have a tanky build. The Barbarian is kind of like your only like go-to super tanky class in terms of like it being in relatively melee range. However, remember there is the Fist of the Heavens build. There are caster builds for even Crusader. If you play D3, you can do other things like the Hammered In, which is kind of a caster. It does kind of get close in melee range, but the whole idea is to have a very tanky class at the end of the day with Crusader and Paladin. Barbarian does have this fortification build where you're able to gain over health. It's almost like the overshield that you guys are seeing right now over on the Sorceress. It's basically in Diablo 3, you build up some shields, and the thing that's most interesting with Diablo 4 is the Sorceress, by far, is one of the most tanky classes in the entire game. It beats the Barbarian out by a long shot, and this is actually partially the reason I wanted to make this video. I was seeing other content creators talk about the game, and they were like, the Sorceress is a very squishy class, but it's a glass cannon. Now, if you actually understand the way the game is designed, this is by far the tankiest class in the game. You get some good CDR on this class, and how it works, there is a talent node. Now, unless this, of course, changes, you would basically get shield that was a percent based off of your HP. So if you stacked HP and then you would cast stuff, your shield would be up so high, you would almost never take any damage from any of the small things. If you play D2, there is like what is called the Immortal Sorceress. You could basically do that. Now, the thing is that there are certain boss mechanics where if there's a giant thing that falls down, you do have to dodge those things. There are certain things where on certain boss mechanics, you just gotta dodge them, okay? This is just the way the game is designed, or in the world boss, you can't just sit in the AoE, but for the most part, it would most arguably be the tankiest class by a long shot. It's no competition compared to Fortification, which is a mechanic that the Barbarian has. But if you're looking for just a tank class that's in melee range, you like the Crusader Paladin to play in melee range, then the Barbarian is your go-to. But if you like I said, the Paladin can theoretically be considered a caster, so I threw the Wizard in there because it is kind of similar in that terms of a playstyle. This isn't necessarily a tier list, by the way. It's just like what is the most similar in terms of the tier, if that kind of makes any sense. Now, going on to the Witch Doctor, as there is no Witch Doctor in Diablo 4, at least at launch, maybe in future DLCs, but the Witch Doctor at the end of the day was a caster as well as a summoner. There's multiple ways to play it. You can have minions. So the Necromancer and the Druid are going to be your go-to classes. Now, I can't talk too much about the Necromancer because that would be talking about the endgame beta, as in the previous version of the game that was available to the public as well as BlizzCon, Necromancer, can't really talk too much about it, but from the gameplay, obviously we already know Necromancer is going to be a summoner class, it's going to be a caster as well. Same thing with the Druid. So those are going to be the two classes that are going to be more similar to the Witch Doctor. So if you like to sit back and have your minions do work, I could definitely tell you though, Druid is more of an active minion playstyle, as in you're going to need to like, kind of monitor them and activate them, versus what I've seen from the gameplay of the Necromancer. Now, if you prefer a rogue / demon hunter, you prefer a long range build, like you want to sit back, do DPS, the rogue can actually do that perfectly fine, but if you prefer the playstyle of a monk or even assassin, the claws, the rogue is going to be excellent for that. Now, I also threw in kind of Amazon here because it's similar in the Boazon. Now, if you're looking for Javazon, there really isn't anything similar to that. Now, the rogue also does have traps. It's not going to be necessarily a trapper build, so if you like the trapper build, unless they make some uniques that really reduce all the cooldowns and they actually add more skills on the skill tree, which I'm not even sure if they're going to be adding into the game. From the previous beta, we did have access to seeing all of the skills, but some of the stuff was locked depending on how far you could progress and how far you can get the class specialization, because that is limited to like a certain part of the progression. So if you like the playstyle of the Demon Hunter, the Rogue is going to be your go-to. It will suit all of your needs. But if you also like Monk in Diablo 3, this is hands down, like this is Monk. Or even an Assassin with the claw builds where you would charge up and there's combos. There is like a talent node later. It's a specialization where you can like, you do certain skills and then it gives you like bonus damage. It's kind of like comboing. So it's most similar to the Assassin. Now, if you prefer the Wizard / Sorcerer from D2, D3, well, your go-to is definitely going to be, of course, the Sorcerer. However, I will go ahead and give a shout out to, if you like the playstyle of, again, Necromancer, Druid, or the Witch Doctor, they can all be considered casters at the end of the day. Now, Druid in D2 might not be the most popular thing to play, other than maybe like the Hurricane, like PvP Druid, which, you know, that was pretty fun. They did most recently buff a bunch of the skills for like the caster Druid in D2, but that would be most similar in terms of the playstyle. Now, moving on to Barbarian, if you prefer the Barbarian, obviously, yes, the Barbarian is the kind of the go-to. I mentioned, like, you know, Crusader, Paladin. It's, like, basically the same in terms of, like, what you'd want to do. If you prefer the playstyle of a Necromancer, again, very similar to the Witch Doctor, or if you like the Druid or even Wizard, the Necromancer could be your go-to class. Now, in terms of Druid, obviously, yes, select the Druid. It's literally in the game, but I'd say, you know, Necromancer is a very similar playstyle because maybe you want to make a second character, you don't have time to play all the characters, you got limited time for this beta, then, yeah, your go-to would be obviously the Druid, and the Necromancer is a very similar class. However, as far as I'm aware of, it's going to be a little bit more difficult maybe to build a melee build with Necromancer, but from the gameplay, there is theoretically some skills, but we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, that is going to be something that we'll have to check out, as I can't talk too much about the Necromancer Kappa, but that's going to be kind of wrapping up the video in terms of what is the best class for you. And in terms of like the numbers, which one can do like the highest dungeon tier and stuff like that, we'll be making videos later down the line. But honestly, at the end of the day, all these things could be changed. Maybe Sorcerers will be super squishy when the beta comes out, but I just want to make this video because some people were talking about it and I was like, I think that they haven't played the previous version of the game or actually understand. But check out the previous videos that I did mention in the pinned comment. As you can see, every single legendary, if you want to see how the RuneWords system is going to be working in the game, maybe later down when the DLC drops. Make sure you guys are subscribed with the bell notification on and check the pinned comment, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care, everyone. Peace. And let me know what class you're playing at the start. I'm playing Rogue, by the way.